And begin.
Welcome and thank you for coming to this talk on Vagrant. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about, probably a little bit under Bitcoin, as Eric has banged on about for a little bit, but I'm very happy to share it with you because it's one of my favorite things. Vagrant is, as this says, development environments made easy. I'm Colin Dean, and I work for those three big letters. Here's a little bit more about me. I'm a software engineer at IBM. I work on a product called Vagrant Explorer. It's a search engine. Formerly Vivissimo, if you're familiar with the Pittsburgh startup scene. I'm an advisor here with Your Talent Agents, soon to become Imagine Careers. The little guy is going way too fast.
Are you done yet?
So we'll just kind of ignore him. I might have bumped the number. Of course, I do have to give you this obligatory statement, blah, 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 blah. I think I actually am supposed to say it. All opinions are my own and not of that of my employers. Just in case you think that IBM is actually saying what it is. These are my credentials for why I think I'm authorized, for why you should listen to me on this topic. I've been using Vagrant since the very beginning, since you could just do gem install Vagrant. And now it's become this great monstrosity that has a company behind it and source wars, and is a fully downloadable program that, if you didn't know any better, you would think was compiled or something. Here's our agenda, the things that we're going to talk about tonight. We'll go through these pretty much in order. There's not going to be like a return to agenda. If you have any questions at any point, please just ask. Vagrant makes development environments easy. Setting up in a developer environment can be very laborious. Setting up something that has a web server running, database server, maybe some kind of a caching server, maybe some other application servers that it relies on. That can suck up a whole day right there. To do it multiple times, you're losing multiple days of work just to having to reset your developer environment. If you do something wrong, you want to change one little bit of it, you're into DevOps and you want to deploy out to Heroku or AWS or something like that, then you're spending a lot of time churning. Please come in. Vagrant allows you to create developer environments that adhere to these three principles: lightweight, reproducible, and portable. Lightweight means that its configuration is nothing but a text file, and that's it. You shouldn't have any other information necessary to configure it. Reproducible meaning you can destroy the product that's created whenever you go from your configuration to a working environment. Destroy it, and with the exact same command, bring it back exactly where it was. Minus any state changes that you made yourself after it had been on. Portable, meaning you can run it anywhere. It should work on Linux, it should work on Windows, it should work on OS X. Really the only dependency ends up being a virtualization environment. The big value to Vagrant is this command, Vagrant up. This starts everything. This starts the whole world. So if you have nothing but your configuration, and maybe you have a box downloaded, you have your virtualization software installed, this starts up everything. Magically, boom, a wild development environment appears. This is output from a configuration that I did. If you can see it, I know it's a little bit small for the folks in the back. You can see it's doing something, importing a base box, whatever the hell that means. Then setting the name, going all the way until until we have a booted machine ready to go. That's it. No more individuals setting up development environments on their own personal machine and then saying, oh, this works on my machine, but only later to find out that you're running 2 different versions of some major software. No more having to rebuild a shared dev server because the new decided to do RMRF everything, and suddenly your server's hosed. And then everybody gets their own versioned development environment because the configuration is just text. It's portable. It can be versioned. Stick it in version control. Under the hood, it's just Ruby. It started out as a Ruby gem and became this full program as it got bigger, and the devs just simply didn't want to deal with multiple Ruby versions coming around. Then you have to install some kind of virtualization software. By default, out of the box, it really likes VirtualBox. And really, in my not so humble opinion, that's what you should be using with it. If you're on other platforms, then VMware is an option. Microsoft's, I think Virtual PC, I believe, is a supported option. Hyper-V is a supported option. And then there's a whole host of plugins. And VMware is one that you do have to pay for. That's a plugin that the company behind this software developed. They kind of said, hey, we got to make money on this software somehow, so we're going to take this one plugin and make it a commercial plugin. And that's the VMware plugin. To install it, you can go download it from Vagrantfile.com. Vagrantfile.com is kind of the source for everything related to Vagrant. There's a good bit of Vagrant stuff on Stack Overflow, but really, Vagrantfile.com is where it is. It's all native packages. Do not do gem install Vagrant. You'll get a very old version of Vagrant. It will warn you like crazy. If you do anything with it, you will hate your life. Woo! Let me just jump a whole bunch. Hold on. There we go. This is an example of a Vagrant file. I'm going to walk through it a little bit, but just kind of take it in and see if you can think for yourself what some of this stuff does. We'll just kind of give you 10 seconds or so. The Vagrant file is what they call a declarative configuration. It gives you the ability to say, put this, just like any other, because it's Ruby, you're writing code whenever you write the configuration file. So you can put things in a variable and use it later and reference it in other places. There are method calls you can chain. All kinds of fun stuff if you're a Ruby programmer. If you're not, don't worry about it. Ruby's pretty easy to learn, and if not, then it's a succinct enough DSL that you should be able to configure your Vagrant instance however you wish. I'm going to go, I already said we're going to go through a little bit. This is the opening of it. We're saying Vagrant. Vagrant is kind of this global object that we get to configure everything. The 2 means that we're going to use configuration version 2. If you do gem install Vagrant, then it's not going to be able to understand this. And these are pretty much all the examples that are out now. And if you have a 1 there, or you're using the old style, then everything will give you all kinds of warnings and let you go.
So it's still almost there constant now. You don't even...
Pretty much. I wish that they would have said that it was a constant, or yeah. But this was the recommended way to do it. And it uses a Ruby block to do this. So this is the thing you're actually going to be doing things with inside, as we'll see on the next slide. This one is where we set what kind of guest we're going to be using. For the longest time, you could only use Linux as a guest. And the people who managed to get Windows running a guest were generally not too happy with it. It was difficult to interact with. You had to have very specific Windows build installed. You had to basically make it look like Linux to the outside world. 1.6 fixed that. The newer versions of it, I think 1.6 came out a month or two ago. You can now actually use Windows without having to do a whole lot of crazy configuration as your box. Sometimes my finger doesn't work. This is kind of the meat of things. Aside from setting the guest OS, you also have to set a box, and really not a whole lot else. These are the 3 required things that you have to have. Setting the box gives this a name, so that if you want to bring this box back up later, or really bring this VM back up later, you can do it pretty easily, very quickly. It doesn't have to recreate everything in order to do it. Box URL is simply where to get that box. For us, our usage within IBM, we have downloaded a box from the internet and we store it locally. So in our things, we pull this down from ourselves instead of from some of the repositories like Vagrant.com or Vagrant boxes, vagrantbox.es. There are a host of other things out there that can help you make boxes. I'm not going to go into the format of the boxes tonight. I'll simply say that they are VMware or VM images with a little bit of metadata in the zip file. That's really all they are. I've also seen other people put this in environment variables or have some kind of crazy block function in there to decide what's going to actually be used. Most of the time, this is enough. Now, this is enough to pull down an Ubuntu 12.04 LTS image, and that's really all you need for a lot of stuff. All boxes are cached, meaning you only ever download the box from that URL once. So you don't have to do it again, because that could take a while. The default precise boxes are 300, 400 megabytes. But if you're downloading something that's considerably larger, such as Red Hat or SUSE, you're downloading multiple gigabytes. Nobody wants to do that more than once. Then they're copied on use. When you do Vagrant up, that whole importing the base box that you saw from the couple of slides ago, it's literally taking a copy of that box and putting it into another directory so we can actually do stuff with it. We can actually start up a VM from it. In this way, you can have multiple Vagrant files, multiple Vagrant projects that are using that same box image without polluting them, without having changes to one affect another. Just the whole, like, portable, lightweight, reproducible. The next ones are ones that I stuck in this particular configuration to have something to talk about. Because they're not there by default. You don't need to have these here. As you can kind of tell from what it says in the line, because it's a very declarative configuration, as we've said, is that these are port forwards. Here we're saying when somebody hits port 8080 on my machine, forward it to port 80 on the guest machine that we're starting out. Likewise with 3307 and 3306, which, anybody tell me what port that is? It's my girl. This default that we have here that forwards port 2222 to port 22 is there by default. You don't have to configure that, at least for Linux guests, because that's the control port that Vagrant uses to do everything. It just does everything over SSH locally. Then we get into provisioning. I'm not going to talk about this a whole lot right now, but it allows you to take that base image and do some setup on it. Things that need to be done every time something is set up. Maybe there you have software that needs to be installed. Maybe you need to set a host name, those kind of things. We'll talk more about that later. As I said a little bit earlier, the Vagrant file is just Ruby. So if you want to do something crazy to determine if plugins are installed or if some other software that you depend to run on your machine is running, maybe even see if another Vagrant instance is running, you can do that here. My example here is kind of tied to the previous slide as our provisioning script. Now this would say, okay, if we're not already provisioned, then make MySQL listen on all interfaces and restart it. Done. Very, 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 very basic provisioning script. I'll talk a little bit about the more advanced usage of Vagrant, specifically multi-VM stuff. I haven't done a whole lot with multiple VMs, mostly because I haven't had the need for it. Most of the software that I work with in Vagrant is just a one-box gig. But this is a pretty common setup to see, where you'll have one server or one VM is your web server, and the other one's a database server. And it ends up being the same configuration within each, just instead of saying config here, you're saying whatever your box is. And that way you can have multiple VMs running completely separate configurations. You can even define things outside, define variables outside, so that if two things need to have very similar configurations, say a common domain name, you can do that pretty easily.
So this is spinning up two VMs?
Yes. I don't remember if there's a limit. I think it may only be limited by the resources on your machine. Although it seems like maybe there might be a limit on the virtualization engine. I think VMware has some kind of limit, like VMware Fusion, I think only limits you to 8. I could be wrong. It's only the second or third cough. I think I'm doing pretty well. Provisioning. Started talking about it a little bit. Takes this like base image. This is supposed to be almost an untouched installation of the operating system. Ubuntu server as it comes off of that spinny medium. Or maybe it's SmartOS as it's deployed onto the cloud. Then installs everything that it needs. So database server, web server, maybe OS updates, although this can be extremely painful if you're having to install a lot of OS updates. So a lot of people just don't do that step. As well as any hostname configuration, any user configuration if you have something to do with users in your software like ours does. Or even pushing a base configuration for your project onto it. And the product that we work with has a configuration file that we will push as a part of provisioning. I showed you earlier that we can do shell provisioning, or it's just a shell script. A lot of people do inline scripts and then have the script in the Vagrant file itself, whereas one that I'll show you in a little bit doesn't do that. It puts it in its own directory and has it run from there because they wanted to. Theirs had grown to such a size that they needed to separate it from the Vagrant file. Ooh. We went back. This is Chef Solo configuration. This is an excerpt from a project that I work on, where we have to use a VM that has a firewall up and running, and the only thing that is open is SSH by default out of the box. So we have to go in over SSH because Vagrant does all of its everything through SSH, and then open up ports. Here we're just saying ignore the configuration here because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense without saying the rest of the configuration. But here we're saying tell Chef to install its IP tables recipe and do a bunch of stuff. Here's its configuration. Chef is a configuration management software if you're not familiar with it. We did talk about it a while ago. Puppet's another one. but we like Chef.
So Chef Solo, that program built into Vagrant, or would you have to somehow get Chef Solo onto?
So it can be.
Okay.
There's a plugin that's on the next page that handles that for you. A lot of the existing Vagrant boxes that you can download from Vagrant boxes have it installed already. It's not really the best practice anymore.
The plugin is the best practice.
Yeah.
Is that just because you don't know which it may be in the box, it may not? So.
It might be an old version. A lot of the boxes that were made that are out there that have Chef already installed on them are an older version of Chef, and Chef, formerly Opscode, really wants you to use the newer versions because it's getting better by leaps and bounds every major release. New major release came out, they want you to use it. These are some of the plugins that are going to really make your life sane. One of the biggest problems that I already hinted at it earlier was doing OS updates. And if you have an older, like Precise 64 image that was Ubuntu 12.04.0, the initial release, and that's what your box is, well, it really sucks to have to pull that image up and run updates on it, because it's going to take a couple of hours just at the speed of Ubuntu servers. With Vagrant Cashier, it writes all those updates to disk outside of the VM, so that next time you bring it up, destroy and bring it up, then all the stuff's already downloaded. It just has to apply it. Vagrant Pristine is really just a shortcut plugin. It's almost an example plugin that destroys the VM and brings it right back up. VB Guest will update for VirtualBox. Not sure how familiar you guys are with virtualization stuff, but I'm assuming you have kind of a base level knowledge of it. Whenever you install, whenever you have a VM guest, there's always some kind of software that's making that system kind of know that it's a virtualized system. It doesn't have to exist there, but it makes things a little easier. VB Guest works with VirtualBox and constantly updates the VB Guest editions in order to ensure that the level of integration between the host and the guest is always at its best. VB Guest and VB Cashier don't play along. You can use them at the same time, but VB Guest doesn't cache. So sometimes you end up having to download the guest editions multiple times. It's being looked at. Vagrant RDP is of course useful if you are using Windows on your VB Guest, or on your Vagrant Guest, because Windows likes RDP. I think Vagrant 1.6, I don't really use Vagrant with Windows. I think Vagrant 1.6 might actually have this baked in now. Now that they actually fully support Windows as a guest.
Does it have Windows 8?
I'm sorry?
Does it have Windows 8 or 8.1?
I don't know if there's an exact, we only support these. I think it's just kind of Windows. Okay. I would assume that they would be testing with like Server 2008 or more recent versions, but I don't know. More plugins, specifically for Chef, because I'm a Chef fanboy. There's Vagrant Omnibus. Chef has this thing called the Omnibus installer that installs all of Chef. This Vagrant Omnibus is preferred over having Chef already installed on your box. It just goes out and makes sure that it gets the most recent version and installs it. Burkshelf is something that helps Chef install dependencies for recipes, and this will automatically go and get them for you. Vagrant Ohio is just another part of Chef that provides some of Chef's variables from the host, meaning if your host needs to have some kind of keys or private keys to access a host server or a Chef server or whatnot, it'll provide those transparently. Then there are the provider plugins. As you can see from this mess of letters up here, hopefully colored so that you can tell the difference between them. It runs anywhere. You could quite literally use Vagrant to manage production infrastructure. You know, all of these are outward-facing services that you could deploy your VMs to. Nobody is telling you to do that. Please don't use Vagrant for your production, but you could.
Why do you list that caveat? What's the big reason?
Vagrant is really meant for development. It makes things easier to be able to destroy and deploy, but when you're one command, you know, Vagrant destroy away from bringing down your production infrastructure, that's bad. Some usage in the real world I'm going to show you, specifically two that I had something to do with, Lanager and Get It. I'm going to pull those up real quick. So, Lanager. Duck out of the way so you can read easily. What you're seeing here is the provisioning script that we wrote. Can everybody see this?
It's kind of blurry back here.
Let me see if I can not bump it up probably one more notch.
Better.
Better? All right. This is a very long shell provisioner script that I wrote to essentially make a PHP development environment on a VM. I did that before I had learned about the majesty of Chef.
Do you like Chef?
Just a little bit. It's okay. So if I were to go back and revisit this, I'd of course make this into a bunch of Chef recipes. But then we get to the meat of the matter, and if you were following along, you'll notice that the example from our slides is pulled out here. It's pretty basic, just setting up a web server and a database server. That's all we really needed. The server is automatically set up within the provisioner. I'm not going to go over this too much. To be ready to go, and when you go to this in your web browser on the host, then it would take you right to the web server as if you were using it, as if it was running on your own machine, but it's actually running on the virtual machine for setup. Show you GitHub. GitHub's is a little bit more elaborate, which is why I'm showing it to you. Just a little bit more elaborate. They turn off their GNSS resolver so that they don't accidentally hit production, because for whatever reason they have some production URLs hard-coded into their software. So they disable that so that the VM can't look up stuff. This is another example of doing some crazy stuff with the box URL, where they're looking to see if the box they want to use is in the current directory, use it, otherwise go download it. Because they have done a whole bunch of custom box development. They haven't adopted the strategy of take a blank out of the box awesome image and do stuff to it. They have a whole bunch of stuff that they've done just to save the work whenever they do this. They also set up a private network so that they can use NFS in order to share their data. And these are necessary steps. And then, as I said earlier, they provision using a shell script that's saved outside of this. Some other ones that I saw that were kind of interesting. This one gets into a whole lot more Ruby stuff outside of the actual configuration than some of the ones that I've seen. It's default for VMware Fusion. Checks to see if it has, if the VB guest plugin is there and prevents it from actually doing anything. Because sometimes it just takes too long. And then there's a whole bunch of instances that it spins up. I think it does 20. So maybe my thought on limitation of VMware Fusion is wrong. And then one more. This one is a good example of using Chef Solo for provisioning. We're also setting the amount of memory available different from whatever the box is. More than likely this box is set to like maybe 256 megs or 512. We're saying 768 MB. And then it adds a whole bunch of recipes within Chef and says, hey, we don't want to handle the installation. Chef, go do this crap. And Chef goes and basically sets up a LAMP box, including memcache, and gives it some very basic configuration in doing so. If I were to go back and revise my Lanager, I'd probably just copy this, because this is pretty cool. Switch back into my presentation. We're almost done. The Vagrant docs are the kind of the be-all end-all of documentation for the product. As I said, I think very early on, Stack Overflow is a pretty good resource for Vagrant questions. See lots of Vagrant stuff on there. I think Vagrant also has a mailing list, and I know they have an IRC chat because I've used it, and there's always people in there. It's a good technology to learn. It's easy to pick up, and lots of people are willing to help you with it. Come talk to me. I'm always willing to talk on IRC. That's pretty much it for Vagrant. The rest of this is just kind of meta stuff. This talk itself is open source. If you want to give it sometime, go for it. Please improve. Please improve.
That's dangerous.
Yeah. If you have any slides you want to add, fork it on GitHub, make changes to it, submit patch requests even. We'll see if I take them. I probably will because I'm a sucker like that. But I like useful, valuable contributions. But don't make it any longer because that's a bad thing. I'm already long winded enough.
I just like busting your chops. That's all.
Oh, I know I talk too much. Vagrant.com is where you want to get it. Remember that? Vagrant.com. Vagrant.com. I'll get to you in a second.
Okay.
That's it for me. I'm Colin Dean, just about everywhere you see it, except for Instagram. I can give a gesture to Instagram.
I was going to tell you about that one picture that I saw, but that wasn't you. Oh, all right.
It wasn't me. Then of course the obligatory. IBM is hiring in Pittsburgh. We're hiring engineers like you would not believe. We have hired from people who have attended here. So if you're interested, then please do talk to Eric. Please do talk to me, and we will find some way to at least get your resume in the system.
Does IBM support that part of your presentation?
Yes, IBM does like it when I say that. I like it when I say that too because there's a referral bonus.
Heck yeah.
So here's a very quick URL if you want to write it down. Please go ahead and write it down. Take a picture of it. This is the last slide, so feel free to. I almost put a QR code up here, but I don't know how many people would actually pull out their phone. Questions? What questions do you have? Let's go over here first.
I was just wondering, like, what level of trust do you give to the repositories that have these pre-built boxes? Because you are pulling down a box, you're kind of trusting that there's nothing on there that is, say, copying code files and phoning home with the contents of them, or something like that. So I guess if you're concerned about that, is that something where you have to build your own from scratch, or are there trustworthy repositories out there?
It's pretty, the official Vagrant files repository, the precise image that I showed, anything you download from, I think, files.vagrant.com, you can trust as much as you can trust running Vagrant. Things that you would download from Vagrant boxes, vagrantbox.es are user uploaded. So trust them as much as you can throw them, which they're data, so you can't really throw it a lot. That phrase kind of breaks down when you're talking computer stuff. You can build your own. It's very easy to build your own. There's a system out there called Packer, I believe is the name of it, that will let you take a OS installation image and then run one command, and then it just magically spits out a completed box. We use that for Red Hat because you can't find Red Hat boxes anywhere. It's not allowed under Red Hat's license, their commercial license. So we had to do that for our own, and because we're IBM, we like to do our own stuff. If you are at the level of security where you have lawyers saying, "Oh, worry about people copying our stuff," build your own boxes. It'll take you. It's when I say like Vagrant will save you 8 hours of building a destructible environment. Spending the 8 hours to build something yourself is probably going to save you lots of hours in courtroom later.
You said that you could store that up in AWS, is that right? Now, if you created an EC2 instance beforehand, can you turn that into a Vagrant file or Vagrant box?
I don't know. I believe that you can, because I believe Amazon publishes the base OS images for various virtualization things, so you should be able to build them if you can't already find Vagrant boxes out there. If you've already changed stuff, then not so much. Like you can't just say like, oh, let's take this image and then convert it to a Vagrant box. It's more difficult to do that because you end up having to build your base and then add your state on top of it, and that's complex. You can do it. There's certainly nothing stopping you, but it would be best in that instance to start from scratch. It's just going to be easier, less error prone.
So, just curious, any specific reason why you prefer Chef to Puppet for configuration?
He gets kickbacks from Seth Vargas.
Yes. Seth and I are good friends.
No, because when you showed the example, it looked very simple. Because as much as I'm not into coding that much, so I'm just curious why you said you prefer Chef.
Two different schools of thought. Chef is born more out of developers who want to write code that describes a desirable state, and then write the steps to get to that state. And it's all code. It's literally like Chef recipes are just Ruby, nothing but Ruby. The architecture of Chef recipes is a little more archaic than I really like, but it works. Puppet is also written in Ruby, but just the backend is in Ruby. The actual stuff that you write is in, I don't think they call it Puppet script, but it's basically like Puppet's own language, own declarative language. A lot of what it comes to is people say that Chef is for developers and DevOps folks. Puppet is more for IT guys. That's a lot of the simplification that I've heard of it. Our specific part of IBM used to be very Puppet heavy. A friend and I started doing stuff with Chef, and then we show them the errors of their ways, and now we're a chef shop. So there are a couple other ones out there. There's Assault, Ansible. For another company that I work with, we're using Chef for all of our heavy lifting stuff, all of our servers, and we're using Ansible for all of our embedded devices because Ansible only requires an SSH daemon running. It almost comes to a personal preference. It's Vi versus Emacs, but there are actually more reasons to it with this religious war within the tech community.
In our case, Mike is 6'4" and 290 pounds, and he told me that he wanted to use Salt, so I said okay.
There will be lots more bike shedding and religious wars on all kinds of configuration management softwares and more. The next 3 days, Pittsburgh DevOps Days is going on at the William Pitt Union at the University of Pittsburgh if you're interested in attending. I don't think registration is closed yet, even though it starts at 6 o'clock tomorrow. So I have to be there at 6 o'clock. I think it starts at 8. So if you're interested in DevOps, if this talk was like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever, and I would love to do this for the rest of my life, then perhaps you should come to Pitt tomorrow and listen to all kinds of talks about what you can do with crazy stuff. The guys who wrote Puppet are going to be there. Some big people within Chef are there. I think we actually have sponsorship through all of the major configuration management tools. Configuration management actually comes as a big thing in Pittsburgh because one of the Puppet authors lives here, and one of the major Chef people lives here, and they're actually on the organizing committee together. So,
Is there anybody here who might actually register for DevOps Days? Because if you are thinking about it, I have an $80 off coupon code. So if you're interested, just let me know. I'll send it over to you. So that means it does cost money to go.
okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
Vagrant, is it similar to Heroku?
No.
No,
Not at all.
not at all.
Heroku, well, maybe the technology behind it is not dissimilar. Heroku is more of a let's take this source code repository and start up a process based on a definition within the source code repository file, a proc file. Start it up and let it run in its own containerized environment, where it can't talk to anything else that's running on the same server. These are what they call dynos. I'm not entirely familiar with the magic behind it, but that's my understanding of it. Vagrant is meant more for local development. Instead of having a shared set of resources, or really a shared malleable environment, it's about having your own. Like taking, I think Facebook uses Vagrant internally for when somebody comes in and a new guy comes in, and he could very easily go and mess up production if they let him anywhere near it. So they give him, here's your data set, here's a machine, do Vagrant up, and then suddenly you have Facebook running on your own computer. Then that's the ideal situation. You want people working with as close to production as it can. Sometimes getting close to production means setting up all kinds of crazy servers, all kinds of crazy hardware, and that's expensive. So why not just do it in software, and you can just emulate it.
What's the largest? What's the largest VM that you've set up, like on the fly, like with all its files, all its dependencies? Is there a limit that Vagrant likes to go to? Like for instance, I have a Solar index that I work on. It's like 30 gigs. So if I wanted to do a Vagrant with Solar and Java and Tomcat, whatever else it needs, and this actual index, it would probably get to like 50 gig. Is that something Vagrant could handle?
That's a better question for, can my virtualization software handle it?
Okay.
If you can create a virtual disk of that size, yes. So the answer is yes.
Yeah.
VirtualBox and VMware certainly can. You're only limited by the size of the
Okay.
disk.
Right.
And then using shared folders, because you can use whatever shared folder solution is built into the virtualization software. If Solar can write over that connection, it works. Our software can't. It won't write our index files over that type of mounted file system. It will, however, write them over NFS. So we have to use NFS internally in order to write our indices.
I'm not a DevOps guy at all, so I'm just like, I do enough, you know, it's, I have a Solar production server that I'd love to have in a Vagrant file. It would make things so much easier. But yeah, I'm definitely going to look into it.
Cool. There's another hand over here.
I'm actually using Vagrant and Heroku in conjunction with each other. I'm doing a class for, I think it's Firehose. It's a Rails class with them, and it's an web application class. But they have us using Heroku and Vagrant together to create an environment locally on your machine.
Certainly. I meant no. I did not intend to make it sound like you couldn't have the two play nicely. Simply the technology behind them is different. It would be more of a develop locally using a Vagrant box that is set up very similar to Heroku, or at least has the same technologies available. And then when you're ready, push up to Heroku for a production or a staging environment.
I wasn't disputing. I'm just telling you, like that's how they have us set up. So
yeah. And that's a great way to do it. Another
Yeah.
project that I haven't touched in forever. It is exactly like that. It's meant to be deployed to Heroku, but I do almost all of my testing on it